All right. So I'm curious for you now. Before we get to like your role today, how long have you been in the real estate industry now?
Wow. I don't want to date myself, but yes, I started back in 2001 with the Okanagan Mainline Real Estate Board. And I was there until 2014 when I came to Ottawa to take the position of CEO of the Ottawa Real Estate Board. And during my time in BC, I also worked for a real estate team in Vernon, British Columbia for a year.
And what made you go from like that side over to the organized side of real estate?
Well, I started in the organized side because my background is in association management. Okay. So that's what I started with. In Saskatchewan, I worked with an organization called the Saskatchewan 4-H Council, which is a youth leadership organization. And that's how I got my start in association management. And I loved the being that trusted advisor to the board of directors, managing the day-to-day operations, working with the staff to bring strategy alive.
And what led you going from the Okanagan to Ottawa?
Opportunity. Yeah, I love the industry. My husband and I sat down one time in Kelowna and cheers to change. And literally the next day I got called by the search firm who was looking for the replacement for the CEO position in Ottawa. And I was like, well, I'll go for it just to see. And here I am.
So over that time, like you were for what is it, like 10 years at both roughly?
Yeah.
And when you're looking at like, what have you seen as like the challenges that have come up over that time at like the board levels that were pretty common?
Wow. There's, always something changing and evolving. I would say that consumers continue to press for transparency, and that has caused the industry to continue to evolve. Boards and associations are always looking to provide great value to members. So we've seen a lot of, types of amalgamations where they can provide better services to members, because it's really all about driving that value to members. And that's what these associations are all about. They're built on the foundations of cooperation. And that is also another, fundamental piece of what we call organized real estate.
Like when you're looking back over that stretch, like one thing that's always interested me is like you always hear people talk about like this is the biggest issue in the industry today. And then I've talked to people who've been in the business 30, 40, 50 years. And they're like, they said that 50 years ago as that was the biggest issue then. And it's not actually, like the example I was often given was, because the average, broker is so old relatively that they're going to be retiring. There's not that people to take over. They've been saying that for 50 years. And it's just the natural progression. Like, have you seen things like that people seem to think are these pressing issues that never actually come up?
That's a really good question. The issues continue to come up. The realtors continue to adapt. Associations continue to adapt. We continue to find ways to move forward, find progress. And a lot of it is around collaboration and working together. And that's one of the things that I've been really focused on in my role. I just want to say what an incredible privilege it is for me to be leading the organization at this point in time. I feel like all those experiences that we've talked about, the connections that I've made and relationships that I've built have culminated to bring me to this point to be able to help CREA. And since I've started in the role, I've really placed a lot of emphasis on that collaboration and listening, and as well as moving forward and pressing forward on and making progress.
Yeah. So because like this is something I've seen over the 10 plus years in the industry is a lot of like on the ground agents aren't that familiar with like what actually happens at association level, which I know is a challenge for associations and boards across the country. Like, so what would, talking to a realtor who was like wondering what CREA, like what would you say like success in your role looks like, especially from like the perspective like a realtor looking in?
Well, success in the role, let's talk about the 2024 housing plan that the government just released. That was the culmination of an incredible amount of work by our advocacy team. And it was so rewarding to see how many of our policy recommendations made its way into that plan. So number one is advocacy. That is what CREA was founded on. And then reputation. It's so important in this point in this environment, as I talked about, consumers pressing for transparency, looking for that So that's another major thing that we do, our national ad campaign, making sure that realtors know that we care about their reputation. We have pride in the reputation of the profession. And then, of course, Realtor and consumer technology, and that brings up Realtor.ca. This is our primary business asset that is industry owned, the number one consumer portal in Canada. And we have a dedicated technology team here that works very hard to make sure that that is of value, not only to consumers, but also to Realtor members. So those are the three main things. I think of it as a three-legged stool. Yeah. There's the pillar of reputation, the pillar of advocacy, and the pillar of Realtor and consumer technology.
And you've been in the role for about roughly 100 days now, give or take a couple weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you? Because you're coming on as someone, has been in the industry for also kind of, because I believe your predecessor didn't come from the industry. And then this time you've come from the industry. So what is that like, giving you kind of that running start? What does that 100 days look like for you?
Well, I've still been on a huge learning curve. Yes, I came up through the ranks and I definitely have a stakeholder perspective. But there's still a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn about, the national scope of the things that we do, the considerations that we have to take as a national organization. We're very strategic. We're very data driven, and I'm learning all of that. Within my first 60 days on the job, I was named one of the top 100 lobbyists in Ottawa by the Hill Times. And I'm like, I know that was not me. It was definitely our advocacy team. Yeah. And they were voted by their peers for their effectiveness and their reputation. And that's incredibly important. So my first 100 days, been very busy. I embarked on a listening tour. I've been meeting with my colleagues across the country virtually and in person, talking about our challenges, talking about our opportunities. And what's been so rewarding is how everybody is ready and to put up their sleeves and continue to collaborate and to cooperate on finding those solutions to drive our industry forward.
What have you found like the biggest difference from being like CEO at the board level to now being at the CREA level?
It's the same, but different. I have an incredible team around me. I had built an incredible team in Ottawa, incredible team here. They're supportive. They're helpful. They're, want to see us all succeed. And they're incredibly dedicated. And, so the other part of it, which is what I love about my job, is working with the board of directors. I mean, these are realtors from coast to coast who are absolutely dedicated to making sure that realtors remain at the heart of real estate in Canada. They are a force to be reckoned with, and they are very forward thinking, and they're led right now by James Mabey in Edmonton and Valerie Paquin in Quebec. And 16 of them. We just had a meeting last week, and it's incredibly inspiring to work with them.
And from that end, like, what do you wish more realtors knew about the industry? Because I know, again, we've done a lot of work with boards, associations, even from Just Homes now through to REM, where they wish more agents would get involved, for example. Like if you could, I always ask this question of people in different positions, if you could wave a wand, magic wand, just change one thing in the industry, and no matter, everyone would vote for any one initiative you picked, what would that be?
Wow.
You have every vote behind you, no matter what.
Oh, boy. Let me see. I think that I would love for every realtor to understand and to know that we have their backs, that we're working for them, that we really care, and that the things that we do are all driven to move the entire industry forward, that we have a tremendous amount of pride in what we do, and we hope that they have pride in what they do. Realtors are, such a valuable community builders. They work so hard for their clients, and their clients literally love them for it. And I would hope if I could wave a magic wand that they would go, I love what CREA is doing for us. I love what the boards and associations are doing for us. Because it is actually realtors who make those strategic decisions on behalf of everybody. And I wish that everybody recognized that importance.
And when you look at, say, the next 12 months, what would your focus be, kind of that short-term horizon? Because, I know a lot of CEOs, when they come into a new role, they want to, put their stamp on the organization. And, sometimes there's always changes that could be made, things like that. So what's your next 12 months look like for you?
Well, the themes of collaboration and progress are really ones that I'll continue to work on. Coming up in October, we have our political action days where realtors come from across the country to meet with members of parliament. That's a collaborative effort, and we're really successful in and obviously, as I've already pointed out, those recommendations making their way into government policy, which is exceptional. And then, I'll look forward to progress on the Realtor.ca front. Because we have an opportunity to make sure that this business asset that we have, this primary business asset owned by the industry, continues to evolve and continues to grow and meet the needs of consumers and realtors. And I'm hoping that we'll come to some decisions and consensus around where that's going for the entire organization. Mm-hmm.
And there's been a lot of talks around like the privatization of Realtor.ca, which, as you can imagine, a lot of realtors have some concerns about. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering from like your end first, like what is the need for, in your guys' eyes, like taking it private versus what you can't do with the current setup?
So let me start with this. There's no privatization happening, which, as I think is sort of some sound bites out there.
Yeah.
So I actually worked with the first task force that began to reimagine a future for Realtor.ca. And that first task force solidified three main things that were endorsed at the special general meeting. The first thing is ownership. So Realtor.ca will remain completely owned by CREA, wholly owned by CREA, and realtors will own it via their membership in CREA. Yeah. So there will be no privatization. There'll be no outside investment. This is going to be definitely continued. This asset will be continued to be managed by CREA on behalf of realtors. The second thing was governance. So the principle of having an independent board, having a taxable entity, instead of calling it taxable rather than for profit, because it's going to take a while potentially for anything to move forward with respect to that. And then the third thing was any revenue, if we do have any profit, will be reinvested. Excellence in governance, wholly owned by CREA, and having that independence in terms of governance and revenue reinvestment. Those three things. So the reasons are around the need for Realtor.ca to continue to evolve. There's always consumer changes, expectations, as we talked about. And then also it needs some operational independence in order to thrive. And to be able to compete against some of these very heavily financed competitors. We are so fortunate that we have the market position that we do. And like I said, that we owe that to the dedicated CREA team. But right now, we need to find ways to diversify that revenue so that we are not as reliant on membership dues moving forward. And it can continue to grow, continue to evolve for the benefit of realtors and consumers.
One of the biggest concerns I've seen from agents when they're talking about it, I mean, there's been two main ones. The first one is like, how will you guys actually make money from the platform once you go into that? Like, where's that revenue coming in from?
First of all, not going to be selling leads to realtors. So that's number one. The first task force actually put some guardrails around those revenue opportunities. Working with outside experts, we've identified about 30 different opportunities. The business case is narrowing in on 5 of them and so projecting out what the possibilities are with those 5 and built the business case around that. And that's what we're going to be taking out to boards and associations so that they can understand a bit more about where these revenue opportunities are going to come from and how they're going to play out and how the platform can continue to transition as we ramp up these opportunities.
Are you able to share what some of those potential ones are? Because I know a lot of people are kind of worried about what that could look like.
Well, I wish I could. I really do want boards and associations to hear about those revenue opportunities altogether. So there's some that are already out there. You can see them on our website. But the 5 that have been chosen are, I'll just name one. We have a data distribution facility, and they're, which is, a class, best in class in terms of what it does. And there's some opportunities for distributing data with the permission of boards and associations and realtors to other third parties, and to make more money doing that. So that's just one of what we call maybe the low-hanging fruit when it comes to revenue opportunities.
That'd be allowing like third parties to put like the Realtor.ca feed on their sites.
Mm-hmm.
So would that...
Making sure the Realtor brand is still there,
Yeah.
that it's powered by Realtor.ca, et cetera. Mm-hmm.
Now, would that lead to a potential where those companies could then sell leads back to realtors through it?
That will all be determined through the contracts that we set up. So that would be something that we would look to make sure doesn't happen if at all possible. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And with that, like this is one I've seen like boards, brokerages, and like there's been different topics where they've been worried about like almost competing against members. So like if you take a member who has a really strong SEO presence in one area and now third party in their town starts doing the same, it'd be like funding their competition or like giving their competition now an advantage. Like, is there any concern around that side of it?
Well, let's not forget that Realtor.ca is our industry-owned website. Yeah. We want it to be the most powerful possible for consumers. It contains the most comprehensive data set. And we want it to be, continue to be the premier portal. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Then the other one we see a lot when they're talking about Realtor.ca and like even like REM comment section, you see this one a lot is like, what in the current structure that you have can you not do that you need the new one to be able to unlock that opportunity?
Right. Well, we can do some of it for sure. But some of these revenue opportunities, when you start to get away from your core business, remember CREA is a not-for-profit association. And there's certain guidelines, in terms of revenue growth. When you start to get away from your core purpose, it actually is a risk to the association to keep its not-for-profit status. Yeah. So yes, some of it we can do, but to really allow Realtor.ca to fly and to move forward and evolve, we need that independence. And then it also mitigates some risk for CREA, and it allows CREA to focus back on its core pillars of reputation and professional advocacy and those sorts of things. Allows Realtor.ca to function more as a technology company and to attract that talent. And so that independence actually is pretty important. I mean, I hear the old adage, if it's not broke, don't fix it. It's actually, in this case, we think is going to be detrimental long term, and ultimately it's going to continue to really increase pressure on membership dues if we don't diversify our revenue.
And one of the other big questions is basically, and I mean, I believe it's a bit of a misconception. Like we've seen it with other boards and associations that have made for-profit entities. Like none of them know where that profit's going. That's always that big question. Is like, are people taking another big salary over there and they're kind of doubled? Like, where's that profit that's being made? Where's that going through it?
Well, that's that third principle of any, revenue, profit, whatever you might call it, the excess revenue after expenditures, which, we don't expect will happen for some time. We'll begin transition as we ramp up, some of the requirements to begin to bring in these revenue opportunities. That principle is also in stone, which is the reinvestment back into the platform for the benefit of realtors and consumers. So there's going to be nobody making money. It's not a traditional, for-profit shareholder. Yeah. CREA is the only shareholder in this case. CREA, it's going to be a wholly owned subsidiary. So, and that direction comes through all the governance documents to make sure that is very clear about how that revenue gets reinvested.
Then the other big one we've been seeing a lot, like speaking from the content we put out that gets the most attention from CREA is the new policy around if you market a property, it has to be within 3 days. The one that we see come up a lot is people just basically the first question is, what's the rationale behind that policy of within 3 days it has to be on MLS? Well,
remember I mentioned that consumers continue to press for transparency. And the realtor cooperation policy is to address the fundamental cooperation that realtors have in the industry. And it basically was brought forward by boards and associations in collaboration with boards and associations to ensure that the MLS systems remain strong, that consumers get the access to the listings. That was the issue. The limited marketing by some members think about coming soon signs, and there was others as well. In a frantic market, some of those properties were not making it to the MLS system for the and getting the widest and best exposure. And so, buyers were frustrated. Realtors who were working with buyers were frustrated. And so this is our MLS systems are pro-competitive. They make sure that the most eyeballs are seen. It's a win for buyers. We think it's a win for sellers and a win for realtors ultimately. So the 3 days is, once you start to publicly market something, please put it on the MLS system.
Right.
If you want to keep it exclusive because there's privacy concerns, security concerns, absolutely. We're not taking away any choice there. Exclusives still have a place. But once you start to market it beyond that, within 3 days, it goes on the MLS system.
But now, and this one we've talked to a lot of agents because on the marketing agency side, we work with a lot of realtors who market their exclusives and coming soons. They're concerned now, and this is what we've heard this both in through REM stuff, our clients, things like that, of it's actually for them, they feel it's driving it more underground, kind of they're being, less people are going to even know about those opportunities because they can't talk about them. Whereas at least when they could market it before, they felt it could go out to, they could still get it in front of consumers, but still have that control because not everyone wants on MLS. So what's is that a concern of it can drive some kind of further underground, that kind of off market?
I mean, in most cases, sellers are best served by putting their listing on the MLS system. Mm-hmm. I think and all we're saying is have the conversation with your seller, determine what is best for the seller. Realtors wear this ethical cape of doing what's in the best interest of their clients. And so the policy just requires that you have that conversation. You explain the benefits of MLS. At the end of the day, if the seller decides they want to keep it exclusive, they can absolutely keep it exclusive. I think that limited marketing tactics are there for a reason sometimes, but they're in most cases the sellers and the buyers will be best served. Consumers ultimately will be best served by putting it on a pro-competitive platform like the MLS.
And the one that I've seen an agent, I don't actually necessarily say I agree with this argument one way or the other, but it was an interesting debate I saw some agents having. I'd love to hear how you thought. Is one, they tried making the claim that they have to follow the lawful directions of their clients. Mm-hmm. And if their clients say, I want you to market it, but keep it exclusive, how can they do they put that first? Or what would that kind of route have to look like for them if their clients want them to say, post the listing on social, but keep it exclusive? Because they do have to follow the lawful direction of their clients. Well, how does that kind of come into play there?
Yeah, lawful direction of your clients. They also belong to an association that, that is a cooperative in nature and provides, the MLS system that is ultimately an excellent tool. And if sellers say, I'm trying to think of the situation where a seller would say, I only want you to put it on Facebook.
Yeah.
I don't want you to put it on the MLS. I certainly, if I have privacy concerns, if I have safety concerns, I will want you to keep it exclusive. I might want you to let your colleagues know one by one, keep it quiet, and use your network. And that's what the policy allows for. But if you're going to start to publicly market it, I'm finding it hard to understand why a seller wouldn't also want it on the MLS system to get that widest and best exposure.
Yeah. One scenario I saw, and this is a very limited case scenario for why someone, because this came up with a client of ours that we had, And it was, they had a listing that was 2 weeks out from coming on. And a very similar listing came up on the market that day. And they wanted to make sure potential buyers of that knew that theirs was coming. So potentially they could have a better offer for them, because you lose a potential buyer there if they see that. So they thought if they could get a sign up today and let people know down the street a similar one was coming, they'd be able to draw more attention to theirs, but they weren't going to be ready for 2 weeks. So they were looking at how can we essentially let people know that'd be interested in that one, that ours is coming, and just because they needed 2 weeks to get it ready. So there's scenarios like that where they're looking for how can we basically let people know to kind of do that for our sellers, knowing that if we do it, we have to be on in 3 days.
You know, the policy is definitely trying to balance that transparency with consumer choice and the transparency part of it. And I think that realtors will figure out ways to ensure that they can advocate and make sure that their listings are well represented. We believe the policy offers lots of flexibility for that. And I think it's going to continue to be a work in progress. And ultimately, I think everybody will be best served through the policy.
And for those, because we're seeing a lot of, one of the questions you might have seen the Facebook post where I asked people if they had questions, and we got a few DMs. One that we got, and I was asked to ask you this question. If someone who disagrees with the policy, what are their routes or avenues to be able to get changes, maybe not get rid of it, maybe have changes made to it? How would that look like for an agent if they wanted to have changes made? What would be the official routes to go through to make that happen?
Right. Yeah. So I would say, talk to your board and association. Obviously, boards and associations approved the addition to the Realtor Code. It's called the Duty to Cooperate. And then CREA actually created the policy itself, and the duty to cooperate also requires adherence to the policy. So they could talk to their board and association about their concerns, their recommendations. Those could be brought forward to CREA. We have a Realtor Code committee made up of realtors, and that could be brought to them if they have a specific thing that they think needs to be changed. But we're still listening. We're still talking to boards and associations about some of the challenges they're finding and the questions that we're getting that they're getting. And it's still early days, and we'll continue to see how it evolves. And nothing's ever necessarily set in stone. And like I said, the policy was created to help realtors ultimately and consumers. So anything that could make it better, we're all ears.
I'm switching topics for a second, because you mentioned one of the pillars is protecting the realtor brand.
Right.
And I'm curious from your end how you approach it. Is you're in this interesting position where you also have NAR in the US doing the NAR brand. There's a lot more going on there with the lawsuit commission, which I realize we have our versions here, which are a little bit different. But there, it feels like in the US, the brand's a lot more under attack there. And because their media is so prevalent here in Canada, how do you kind of look at what you can do here, given that we're impacted by what's happening with the realtor brand down in the US, where you don't have the same control that you might have here?
Yeah, I think it's really important to remember that we're different. We always know as Canadians we're different than the US. And I know that, it's probably disconcerting to see some of the press down there, and realtors can question their value. But, we believe realtors have incredible value. And as I mentioned before, the services and the value that they provide and the home buying journey, as well as the selling journey, is incredibly important. And that's what we focus in on. And, we will continue to drive forward that pride in the profession, pride in what realtors do. In Canada, I would argue that we have a stronger regulatory environment. I would also say that we have about 80% right now and growing of, transactions where realtors working with buyers, that it's laid out transparently how they get paid. In the US, that wasn't the case. So we have a lot of lessons we can learn here. And we're still thinking about that as a national association and how we can ensure that we stay ahead of things. And remember that went on for years before the settlement happened, where ours here in Canada hasn't even been, deemed a class action. We're at the beginning. And so I believe we have some opportunities to really lean in on that value and continue to ensure that government knows and understands that there's much more transparency here, for sure.
And I know you probably can't speak too much to the lawsuits since they're ongoing, but what would you like, and if you can answer this, I understand if you can't, what would you say are like the key differences here in Canada that like basically we don't have that they have in the US? Like, what are those main differences? Yeah,
I mean, like I've mentioned, I think that we have a much more transparent environment in terms of how buyers agents get paid. The written service agreements, we have, like I said, over 80% of transactions are covered by some sort of writing that really, ensures that buyers understand how agents are paid. And I think our regulatory environment, like I said, is stronger. And I think that we're a smaller community. It's easy for us to talk about value and ensure that we continue to drive that forward.
And with like each province being very different how they operate, like you see like how BC to Manitoba, Ontario, like very different situations there with like specifics of the day to day. Like, for example, essentially no double ending in BC, for example, whereas a lot of other areas you can still do that. How do you look at it from like the CREA perspective of kind of protecting the brand, getting the value out there when it does operate so differently across the provinces?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a challenge, but I would say that the federal government is also paying attention. I don't know if you noticed that in the budget, there was a line that says that there's potentially a buyer's bill of rights of some sort coming. And that has driven, even though the federal government doesn't have a lot of levers, they still believe that there's some principles that should apply across the country. And I think regulators are working together on that. And I think as a national association, we can be working with those regulators to make sure that that realtors, are represented in that, because sometimes when government reacts, it's sort of with a sledgehammer. So we always want to make sure that they understand how the real estate business actually is transacted. And that's always an education. And that's the key role that I think we can play, is making sure that the government understands how real estate is transacted, that it's different across the country, but that there's some commonalities that are common principles that are very important.
And one, like going back to the realtor brand one that I see a lot of agents worried about, it recently came up because a social media post went viral, which was like, nobody hates a bad agent more than the good agents. And it's like, some are worried about like that watering down of the brand, because essentially it's like, 98% of licensees are realtors or something high like that. Like, how do you guys approach it from that end, where because there's so many and a lot, it's not really like a business? Like, for example, like anecdotally, when I got my license, half the people who were going to become realtors had no intention of ever selling a house. Like, again, very anecdotal there, but it was 50% of people in the room who were getting their license had no intention of ever being a realtor. They just wanted access to the data. So like, how do you kind of protect the brand, knowing that there's a lot of people who are a realtor but aren't really part of the industry?
Yeah, well, this is that they talk about one of those ongoing conversations since I've been around. It's certainly how do we ensure the professionalism, given the sort of ebb and flow of members coming in and out of the business, and some of them being extremely successful and some of them not, and some of them practicing, and some of them not really. That's something that I think we can solve together or work on together and continue to work on. That's why, collaboration on that front is so important. My colleagues across the country have been talking about that. And so we want to be part of that conversation. We have a role to play. But it's a competitive marketplace, and so we always have to keep that in mind. And that's really all I have to say about that. I mean, we have the National Code of Ethics. We also, if there is something that really is egregious that somebody does, fraud, those types of things, We have the ability to, through the Realtor Code and through our process, to remove their ability to call themselves a realtor, and to use the MLS trademarks, because those are trademarks that we own. And so, if we saw harm to the reputation of the entire country and the realtor brand, we would take action for sure.
And especially when you're like being based in Ontario, you've been terrible before. You've seen like the last year, there's been a lot of division at like the association level, and realtors upset about certain policies, which I know it's not a CREA one, so we won't get into the specifics of the policies. But when you look at that type of thing, how is that impacting how you're doing things like rolling out the new Realtor.ca, moving it to a new company? Like, have you seen what's happened with the division in Ontario specifically, and a little bit in other areas, how that impacts your plans and rollout for what you're doing now?
Well, the good thing is that members are paying attention and watching. And this is what you need. You don't want an apathetic membership. You want people to care. You want your members to care. And so I think that is what has really come out of this, is sort of reawakening of the process of organized real estate, the governance of organized real estate. And so when we think about rolling something out like the huge lift that thinking about the Realtor.ca's future is, we realize that we need to bring members along on the journey as well. And that's why it's important to keep talking about the fact that it's not going to be privatized, that it's going to be wholly owned, that it's, there's reasons for us making this move. Give us your feedback. What are your concerns? You brought up a number of them. So that will help us make sure that we address those concerns when we go out to boards and associations and members. We want to make sure that primary business asset is protected. And so, but also that listening and that collaboration builds that trust. I think there's some trust issues, frankly.
Yeah.
And it's like, is this really, are you really doing this in the best interest, in my best interest? It's enough trust issues to go around between clients and realtors, between realtors and associations, between realtors and realtors. And so, again, conversations are really important. I think social media sometimes doesn't have all the facts. And so I always suggest go to the source, talk to the source, find out for yourself. Don't necessarily listen to the stuff that's being spun on social media. It may not be accurate, as we know. And trust that your associations are working their hardest on your behalf, and go to them, hold them to account, ask them questions. So ultimately, I'm actually, there's lots of opportunity in this discourse that's been created because realtors are paying attention. And that's what we'll lean into when we start to talk about the next steps for Realtor.ca.
Having been at different levels of the industry, association boards, if an agent who's never been involved before was looking at, okay, I want to get involved, I want to start being heard, my ideas being in there, giving back to the community, where would you think is the best place for them to start?
Volunteer at the local board and association. There's committees. So every association has a group of paid staff, but they rely on volunteers and the expertise and the input of members to help guide the decisions and actually as an extended workforce, quite frankly. So I would say, volunteer at your local board or association. We just had established our committees for the year. We have a number of committees. We have over 100 volunteers across the country who are on our various committees as well. So that's how you learn an awful lot, especially at the board level. If you volunteer at a professional standards committee, you will find out so much about all of the fundamental rules and processes that ensure that competitors play nice in the sandbox on the MLS system. And every volunteer that gets involved usually as a realtor goes, wow, I had no idea. And then the next step, hopefully, is that you get involved on a board as a director. And again, it's all about working together to drive progress for the entire organization and for realtors.
And go back to realtor.ca for a sec, because one thing we've noticed, and for example, was a really widely read REM article, was some areas starting to add sold prices to realtor.ca.
Mm-hmm.
What's kind of that looking like to eventually have it maybe Canada-wide? Like where kind of do we stand on sold prices rolling out across the country? So
interestingly, where sold prices have been added, the eyeballs and the score of market share has gone up significantly. Consumers are looking for that type of data. So right now, when a property sells, it just disappears. But having said that, the regulatory environment in Ontario doesn't allow that. So that would be something that would have to change. But there's other things that can be done, at least to show that it's conditionally or pending sold. I think we're working with a board in British Columbia to sort of show those different statuses. That's the kind of information that that consumers are looking for, that they can find on some other portals. And so that is something that will continue to hopefully evolve. But again, we have regulatory environments that may hold us back in some cases. But we're really creative, and we've done such a remarkable job so far, and we'll hope to continue to build on that.
And last one, what would you look at over, like, say, the next 10 years as the biggest challenges coming for CREA and the industry in Canada as a whole?
Well, I think that innovation is really going to drive a lot of not only the way that houses are built, but the home purchasing and financing side of things is going to be driven by a lot of innovation. Of course, everybody's talking about AI.
Yep.
That is yet to be determined how that's going to impact us. But I would say those are, the innovation is going to exponentially grow. And I think we're going to see some really creative things coming forward, not only in terms of like I said, the way we're building houses, but the way we're financing houses, and all of that. So it's actually a pretty exciting time for sure.
Are you guys looking at bringing some more AI into, like, realtor.ca, for example, on the consumer side?
Well, our anything that we do with realtor.ca is driven by helping consumers in that journey, and also making sure balancing that value to realtors. So if we see opportunities for AI to help, we'll definitely be looking at those types of things. Absolutely.
Sounds good. I appreciate you spending the time with me and having me up here in Ottawa.
So it's been a great pleasure.
Great getting to chat and getting to know you. We never really crossed paths that much before.
No, I think we did, though, once.
A couple times we've met, but it was always more like in passing.
Yeah.
It was nice to get to know you.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming all this way. No problem.